Well, last night there was a game night at the Fikes' house, and I won. Let it be proclaimed. Yea, verily, the Lord of the Ring risk, it was nothing for me. That's how we look at life, isn't it? Winners and losers. You're either one or the other. That's what the world says to us. Take, for instance, there was a trial that took place in Wisconsin. I'm not sure if you heard about it. It took place in Kenosha, where a boy, if you're 18, you're a boy, where a boy was found not guilty in a legal matter. And it seems like there were two takes on this. Both of them were the same words. It's just the way that your mouth was used. Some people said, Kyle Rittenhouse got away with it. Other people say, Kyle Rittenhouse got away with it. Same words. One views him as the winner. One views everyone else as the loser. And neither of them are right. Nobody won. Nobody. None of this is worth celebrating. None of this is worth saying, you're the winner, you're the loser. The same can be said in this text. There are no winners in this text. Can you show them to me? But see, Jacob, he got away with it. Let me tell you straight up front right now, Jacob does not get away with anything. He does not get away with anything in this text. But in order to understand this text, we have to understand this concept of what does it mean to be blessed? Because our quest in this life, it seems to be to rank things in terms of winners and in losers. Because we are always in a quest for control. That's what this passage is about. It's about a quest for control. Who's going to be named the winner? Who's going to be named the loser? And how do you know the one who receives the blessing? In this passage, I ask three simple questions, but this is one of those passages, I seriously could preach this for 4 weeks. I mean, all I have to do, I have 4 characters, and I could do the 4 characters of this passage. And each one of them, what role they played, and how they view God, and how they view the blessing in terms of this. I mean, it's a layup, and I love doing that. Because Genesis in the Bible is, to me, this is some of the richest stuff that you will find in all the pages of the Scriptures. It is also one of the most psychologically insightful stories you will ever read. This happened around 1750 BC. You're going to have to go about 3,500 years until there's this guy named Sigmund Freud who starts to come up with these kinds of insights, and he's very late to the party, guys, because of what we see here in this passage. So 3 major questions that I could ask of this text are, what do they want to control? How do they seek control? And what is the alternative to control? That's one way you can look at this. But let me just peel back a little bit of layers of the Scriptures to you to let you know that that's not the only way you can look at this. Because this whole passage, everything seems to flip. Where the middle of this passage, the area that everything hinges on, is verse 18, where the father says, where Jacob goes into his father and he says, "My father," and he says, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" That's the center of this. But at the beginning of this passage, we see that the son, the oldest son, the firstborn, Esau, is sent away on a secret mission. What happens at the end of this passage? The second-born son, he's sent away on a secret mission to save his life. In the cover of darkness, both of them. Everything done in secret. This whole story should be shrouded in shadows. But for our Western minds, let's take it out of that deep literary angle that you can take at this. And let's just look at this from these simple 3 questions, which are always good questions to ask. What do they want to control? Because that's the thing that we want to control. Because this story is every American's nightmare of what's going to take place at Thanksgiving. I mean, it's all the dysfunctionality and no fun whatsoever. This is, I mean, if you think your family is dysfunctional, take heart. God takes this dysfunctional family, and the Savior of the world is going to come out of this family. God can do anything with anyone, so remember that. But all of this is about the blessing. What is the blessing? If I was to explain it maybe just in the most basic of terms, it's what a father is going to speak over the life of his son. Just yesterday, I received a letter from my father. And he said, "Here's a letter I meant to send you when you were 18 years old, and somehow he was moving to Alabama, I was moving to college, it all got mixed up, and I was able to go back and read the things that my father wanted for my life, and the pride that he has in me, that he had in me at the age of 18. See, that's the sort of thing that a blessing is. But it's more. It's more than that. If you go to Genesis chapter 1, you'll start to get the idea of what this principle of blessing is. And honestly, the idea of blessing, it goes through the entire Bible. This is not a small kind of idea. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 22, we read at the end of creation, He's made mankind and God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters in the sea." So God blesses things from the very beginning. In verse 28, we see that God blesses people for being made in His own image. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." In chapter 2, verse 3, we see that God blesses the Sabbath day and He makes it holy. And then you go to chapter 12, verses 2 through 3, where God is working with a different family now, not Adam and Eve. Now He's working with Abraham and his family. And this is the promise that we receive as Christians, because we are part of this. "I will follow me, Abraham, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless those, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Now, I want to just hang on this for just a second, because in this entire passage, I think what you see is that Jacob and Esau and Rebekah and Isaac get blessing wrong. They remember what blessing is all about. See, if we are a spiritual community that receives and shares God's blessings with the people of Maryville, Blount County and beyond, we've got to get blessing right? If it's just about stuff, then we will fail. If it's just about having stuff, we will fail no matter how many people ever come in our doors or how few. It doesn't matter, because the greatest blessing is God himself. That's the greatest blessing. And so let us keep that in mind. Let's also keep in mind that what God says in these verses, who's going to do this? I will make you a great nation. Constantly, he's saying, I will bless you. I will bless you. Those who dishonor you, I will curse them. I will protect you. This is all that God is saying through to Abraham in chapter 12. But the point here in this passage in chapter 27 is, I'm going to control this. I'm going to control the blessing. I'm going to make things happen. By the way, that bad stuff. When Sarah tries to make a child come out of Abraham and Sarah, when she tries to make that happen by saying, oh, here's my Egyptian slave girl, here, have relations with her, bad things happen when we try to make God's will happen. Because the blessing of God is received, not achieved. That's what we read in the entire book of Romans. We spent basically a year and a half learning that, among many other things. But that is the big upshot of all of this, is that if we want God's blessing, and what is the blessing? The blessing is the approval of God. If you want it, you must receive it. It's not anything that we can manufacture. We cannot do enough good stuff, guys. Because we will always get in our own way. Because we are the reason why we need salvation. We are not the cure. So what they want to control is God's blessing. And this idea of blessing, it goes even into the New Testament. If you go to, say Matthew chapter 5. You've heard this before, but I just want to remind you of this. In Matthew chapter 5, we're in the Sermon of the Mount. And Jesus opened his mouth and taught them, saying, he's going to teach you what blessing is. And he's going to show you that blessing is absolutely different from what the world is telling you. The world is telling you that if you want to be blessed, then you've got to go to college, you got to get this job, you got to have this spouse, you got to get this house, you got to go on this career track, and this is what the life of blessing looks like. It looks a lot like the American dream, guys. Hint. No, that's not what it looks like. It does not look like the American dream. It looks like this. Blessed, in other words, approved of God, are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Not the ones who yell the loudest. Not the ones who insist on having their own way. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice, because then you've got it right. Then you've got it right, guys. It's not because everyone on Twitter is saying good stuff about you, because that ain't ever going to happen. And if it does happen, just wait a minute and hit refresh, and it'll change. It'll change. So what they want to control is this blessing, is getting all, but see, they want the stuff. See, the stuff that Esau is seeking ultimately is spiritual, because that's what the blessing is, but it's reflected by these other blessings that God brings into his life. That's how they would see things. But how does Esau in general deal with life? You can go to chapter 25, verses 29 through 34. That's the infamous scene where he's super, super hungry. He's come back from hunting. He wants some of that red soup that you fixed, Jacob. Give me the red stuff. He was red and he was hairy, and so I guess it was, but the point of that story, that's actually him giving away his birthright. That's him saying that my role as the firstborn, it means nothing to me. What means the most to me right now is this thing that's going on right now. That's all that matters to me. And so if the things that are right here in front of your nose are the only things that matter to you, then you will not make the sacrifices that are necessary to keep this family together, Esau, because you will only be considered about what's happening right now. You will not have the vision for the future. The thing that's scary, though, is that Jacob has vision for the future, and he's willing to do anything to get it. That's what scares us about Jacob. Because this is not a declaration of how you're supposed to go about achieving family peace and unity in your family. It's not. Because Jacob, though he seems to get the blessing, he doesn't get away with anything. But as we're looking at this passage of what they're trying to control, the blessings of God are the real point. But that doesn't stop this family from trying to control the situation. Control has always been our problem from the Garden of Eden till now. Is that we are always trying to control other people. How is control exerted by Isaac in this situation? He uses the carrot method, right? He uses the blessing of, if you are the good son and you do all the stuff that I tell you to do, then I will bless you. Quick question, is that love? I don't think so. This does not look like a healthy father, and it's very far away from the father who we read about in chapter 26 of Genesis, who prays for 20 years for the birth of his sons. He prays for 20 years. That's one verse that you see in chapter 26. He prays for 20 years for this. But then the Lord speaks to him. And in verses 3 through 5, this is what he says to Isaac. He says, sojourn in this land and I will be with you. Notice that God says what he's going to do. And I will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven, and I will give your offspring all these lands, and in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Again, we see that vision of God wants to give all these blessings to Isaac. Why? So that he can share them with the nations. This is why missions exist, is because of this. And because, verse 5, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. But then we get into chapter 27 and all this yuck here, where we see what is the reality of who Isaac is. He is blind. And if you do not get anything else from this passage, notice that all 5 senses are used throughout this passage, that Isaac is duped by several of them. That first, He's blind. We see that. And then the greeting comes from his son, Jacob. He says, "Hi, I'm Esau." And Isaac's like, "I'm not sure if you understand how this works, but my senses of hearing are heightened. I can hear the difference in your voices." Uh-oh, as I said earlier. And then there's a sense of feeling. He feels his hands to make sure that Esau is living up to his name, which means Harry. You know, great name. Even as a kid, they called him Harry. And then he's lied to by his sense of taste. He wants to have venison. He gets 2 goats. And he gets fooled by that. Not just because Rebekah was that good, because that's the point, is showing just how senseless this sensuous man has become. He's absolutely senseless. He goes and he smells his youngest son, and he says that you smell like a field. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a good thing. I'm a city kid, but the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. I guess that's a good thing in their culture. I guess that's a cultural thing. But what happens is that Jacob continuously lies in verses 5 through 29. But let's just flip the script for just a second. Imagine that you are Jacob. And you have to do all these lies for your father to approve of you. Do you feel the sting of that? That it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, you are a twin. You're the same size as your brother. I mean, we say that Esau is this manly man and Jacob is a man who dwells in tents, so therefore he's a mama's boy. That's not what you read in the Genesis account. In the Israelite culture, Jacob was considered a giant physically, because later on, he moves one of these stones that would have taken 2 or 3 men to move. He was a straight up hoss, guys. So give up this mythology of Jacob being some mama's boy just because, Rembrandt drew him that way. I mean, with pink and rosy cheeks. Sorry, no. He was a dude who was outside with sheep all the time. He was a manly man. But he was one who understood how to apply the laws of husbandry. And then we see Esau. How does he try to manipulate the situation? Through emotion, through pleas, through just being the guy who has the cloud over his head. He can never get it right. Why? Because he's not thinking forward at all. He's not thinking about the things of God. He's marrying these Hittite women. He's not considering his parents are saying, listen, you might want to stay away from those girls. He doesn't listen at all. And that's part of the reason why Esau's on the outs with Rebekah. We read that in verses 46 and 47. She says, these wives that he picks are going to be the death of me. I wish I were dead. Rather than having to deal with my son's wives that he has, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. So, daughters-in-law, if you think you ever had issues, may I submit to you a worst-case scenario? But here in this passage, I want to make sure that we're clear that this is what happened, and the Bible tells us what happened, not about some pretty kind of touched up version of reality. He says, this is how dysfunctional they were. This is how messed up the whole thing is. And what does Jacob get out of this? Does this provide him the shortcut that he wants to blessing? Okay. After this scene, he has to run for his life. He runs away penniless. He does not even have a pillow under his head. He sticks a rock under his head and is sleeping in the open country. He becomes an indentured servant for the next 20 years. Does this sound like good times at the ranch? Oh yeah, he comes back with 12 kids who absolutely hate one another. He has 4 wives who hate one another, who are constantly at odds with one another. Oh, and one of them he really likes, and he says, here, I'll give you an extra nice suit. And he's the one who ends up getting sold into slavery. Does this sound like your best life now? Not at all. This does not, does Jacob get away with anything? No. In fact, when he meets Esau 20 years later, he says, here, take it all. What I did was wrong. And somehow God has, now I'm not saying that Esau is the most put together guy, but he says this. He says, I have more than enough. That may be the only bright spot I see in the life of Esau, where he says, I don't need to seek revenge because God has taken care of me too. Well, so what's the alternative to this? Because see, none of this is ever finished. This story is never really finished. Jacob doesn't get away with it. He ends up in another country. Where does Esau end up? He ends up in another country. Isaac and Rebekah end up spending the next 20 to 30 years looking at each other, knowing what the other one did. No one gets away with anything. How does this point us to Jesus? Because this is the reason why Jesus came. Because we are all in messed up families like this. One of the other titles I was toying with was, This Is Really Us. Because we want to have the family from the show, This Is Us, where you have a mixed race family, and the father's a great guy and mom's a great gal, and they all love one another, and they have these iconic vacations, and they have this cabin, and oh man, it's great. Guys, that's a show. That's a show. It's written so that you'll cry at the end. It's so that you'll have the feels, and so they can sell you soap or whatever. I mean, that's what This Is Us is. This is really us. This is really us. This is who we really are. And this is the us that Jesus came to save. He did not come to help some of you who just need a little bit of help. He came for hard-boiled sinners. He came for people who really have issues. And that's why he really died. And the great news is that when he died on the cross, what were his last words? It is finished. Now it's done, Jacob. I've taken care of all of it. You don't have to carry it any longer. This is the treasure that we seek.